Sonic Frontiers. I cannot tell you how excited I was for this game, even from its initial reveal all the way to its release. I finally get to talk about it, and the game released a year ago. Hey, not off to a great start. Oh, my poor plane won't stop me this time. Alright, as everyone watching this video likely knows, Sonic Frontiers is a fresh start for the Sonic franchise. Switching up the gameplay style for the first time in what is it, like a decade? Now, instead of running down hallways really fast, we get to run around open areas really fast. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of this change. This is something I've been wanting to see for years now, and I'm so happy it finally happened. Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the boost games, for the most part, but something about this just feels right. Like, Sonic is known for being fast, his whole thing is speed, but despite the boost games usually having a focus on speed, it didn't feel like Sonic most of the time. And I think it's just because of how linear those games were, whereas now in Frontiers we have several huge islands to run across. And yeah, there are cyberspace levels, but I'm pretty sure those are here just to entice people who enjoyed the boost games to try out this new gameplay style. Well, we're talking about cyberspace, I guess I should actually start the review. I don't like cyberspace. I don't know why either, that's the weird part. I enjoyed the boost games, I think it's just Frontiers physics. The boost felt more like a run rather than a boost of speed. It just makes me feel like I'm playing something similar to Lost World. That's weird too, because I also didn't hate Lost World. It's far from a good game, but it's pretty okay. But yeah, something about these cyberspace levels just don't click with me, especially the ones that focus more on platforming, which is strange because Sonic games have always kind of been like a platformer at heart. Back in the day, went toe-to-toe with the king of platformers, and they were really good. But again, I think it's something about the physics in Frontiers. Platforming in the open zone feels fine, but something about doing it in a forced 2D setting just feels off. But hey, let's stop talking about the side part of the game and get into the main course, the centerpiece, the culinary masterpiece. Okay, I've got other words for it. Let's just talk about the open zone. As much praise as I've already given to Frontiers' open zone, I have very mixed feelings about it. Sometimes it works really well and you're running around at the speed of sound. Other times it feels like the game keeps you glued to the floor. As soon as you hit a rock, you suddenly get launched into orbit. Considering this game is likely going to be the future for modern Sonic, all that I ask is you stop trying to keep me to the ground. There will be times where I try to jump off a ramp and it just throws me straight back into the ground. It's really unfortunate because, as stated, the game is fun to run around in. No joke, when I first beat the game, I would boot it up and just run around for a few minutes trying out different jumps and whatnot. And that's another thing, I think the game really should let you experiment with that kind of playstyle. Yes, I know I really shouldn't say the M word, but come on, Frontiers is totally the perfect time to have proper momentum and allow the player to build up speeds with slopes and throw themselves across gaps. Back before we really knew a whole lot about Frontiers, other than the fact that we would have several different islands to travel on, I assumed that we would travel between these islands. Some fun little minigame where Sonic drops down a ramp, builds up some insane speed, and he runs across the water. Maybe similar to how you travel to different islands in Sonic Rush Adventure. And just another small nitpick, there's water on a few of these islands and just can't run across it while boosting. Which always kind of bothered me. It's not even that big of a deal, but Sonic has proved he's capable of running on water before, and the game just doesn't let you. And it's not even like you'd really gain much from doing so, with a small exception near the end of the game. I'm just disappointed that you can't do it to begin with. That's something I kind of just got used to with this game. Just the fact that there were a bunch of small, tiny details they missed out on. Or, some things they kind of fumbled the bag with. But something I don't think they fumbled the bag with was the combat. Dude, Frontiers' combat is so much fun. People complain it's too button mashy, or clearly the ones who just don't like the fact that combat takes a more cinematic approach rather than combat focused. I mean, I can definitely see both sides. Hell, I just said I love the combat, but I just think Sonic works better with more simplistic cinematic combat. I definitely wouldn't complain if we got some more involved combos. This is something I've noticed a lot with games recently. It's the fact that they rarely use the whole controller. Modern day controllers have several buttons, and we are far past the days of needing one button to do everything. Sonic Frontiers is a pretty big contender of this. I I mean, like, I never really found it to be a big problem most of the time. The homing attack and default punch button are the same button, which makes sense because you want to home in onto an enemy before starting your first basic combo. But there's several special attacks in the skill tree that also use that same button, and there's some attacks that require you to use the same button that's used for the boost. Sometimes I'd end up platforming and go use a boost jump and chain into a homing attack, but then I'll end up doing the cross slash and it sends me way off course. Yeah, back to the skill tree. It's actually a really cool idea. I think they got it pretty good for their first try. Just wish they expanded upon it. I don't hate that it branches into two paths, but I feel like they should have almost doubled the size of it. I'm not saying they should have added entirely new skills, but I do think that they should have included some skills that upgrade existing ones. Sonic Boom is one of the first skills you unlock, and once you get Cross Slash on the third island, that's just a better version of Sonic Boom. I think including upgrades to some of the moves you unlocked earlier would be a perfect fix for this. Another part of the combat I'm not a huge fan of is the parry system. I don't hate the fact that you can hold it, but I think when you release it, that's when you should get the actual parry. I think holding it should be more of a guard that reduces ring dropped on hit, or even negates ring dropped altogether. There's also that whole floating thing. You shouldn't be able to hold a guard while floating in the air. I think the parry should either let you hover for just a little second, or it should trigger immediately and then have you drop back down. But when I think it should be appropriate to hold a parry in midair? Yeah, it's about time I talk about Supersonic. Supersonic was done perfectly in this game. His fights are amazing and insanely cinematic. Honestly, this is how I want Supersonic fights to be done in the future. Hell, maybe just have Supersonic for bosses in future games. Plus, they decided to get Kellen Quinn for the Titans soundtracks, and wow, they're amazing. I absolutely love this new approach for Sonic's music as a whole. I've always found rock working perfectly well for Sonic, especially for the main/final themes. But making multiple rock songs is even better. I mean, hey, even the more ambient songs are really good too. When I first heard the change to the main soundtrack, I was really worried, but then I got to the main game after the first cyberspace level, and the music kicked in. It was such a cool moment. Oh yeah, that reminds me, I never really talked about the cyberspace music. Yeah, no, the cyberspace music it's good too. It's neat that every level has their own corresponding music. For the most part. Yeah, they did a really good job on the soundtrack all around. The script is kind of all over the place, and there are a lot of things I want to talk about, which is a totally amazing transition to talk about the story. I enjoyed the story of the game. It has its flaws, but hey, they got Ian Flynn on this. And the amount of little quips he has Sonic say while traveling across the islands are great. My personal favorites are the ones that acknowledge Tangle the Lemur from the IDW comics, and the one that talks about Savik. Yeah, the actual story stuff now. The introduction cutscene is fine as it is. It always kind of bothered me that the prequel media is kinda required, primarily for Knuckles and his prequel animation. The comic less so, but still, it would have been nice to see them included in the game, making the digital comics available from the main menu alongside with the animation. Oh yeah, while we're talking about the animation, it looks amazing. If we ever get another 2D animated Sonic show, I want either that or something similar to Across the Spider-Verse. The story overall is pretty solid. I'm not going to go through everything, I'm just going to kind of summarize a few of my thoughts on it. I like the idea of the Ancients, especially with their designs looking very similar to Chaos, which basically connects the Ancients, and by extension the Coco, to the Chao, which we know are connected to Chaos. The only thing I don't like about the Ancients, though, is that it feels like we don't see enough of them, since they're only seen through cutscenes and we don't really interact with them at all. Our knowledge is very limited, as, only told so much from these different characters and from the different cutscenes. And since we only see them in these cutscenes, that means we're also limited to the amount of Chaos Emerald we see. As we find out in this game, the Chaos Emeralds are actually space rocks, but the Master Emerald isn't, for whatever reason. Okay, stuff aside, I love how every character is handled in this game. A few scenes aside, Chronos Island Amy cutscene. But I mean, hey, the character interactions are great as well. I love the cutscene with Sonic and Knuckles, where Sonic sits down and goes to open up with a joke, but he stops himself, and Sonic and Knuckles kind of just sit there together. Oh yeah, then there's the Tails storyline, where he watches a Coco grow into his own person, and that inspires him to go out to the world for himself. And Sonic is proud of Tails. It's so good. But it wouldn't be a story review if I didn't mention Rhea Island. Okay. The towers are fine. They're not the best, but they're fine. The bit of story at the top of each tower is clearly just a way of wrapping up some lore they hadn't told yet, because, unsurprisingly, the game was rushed. Like, seemingly we were supposed to actually go onto the ancient space shuttles at some point in the story, potentially instead of Uranus, as originally Uranus, Chronos, and Rhea were all one massive island. Like, honestly, the only part of the game you could really tell is rushed is Rhea. Like, you watch Sonic struggle to walk at this point in the game as his cyber corruption gets worse and worse, and, like, this threat you're dealing with the entire, like, literally throughout the entire game is just dealt with in a single cutscene. We watch Sonic basically die, his friends and Eggman show up, and then his friends use the power of friendship, and boom, the cyber corruption is gone. Yeah, okay. A little bit more upset towards the end, but it really makes me upset to see how rushed the conclusion of this game is, because, like, even the final fight is rushed. You fight the final Titan Supreme, which is the easiest Titan of, like, all of them. And it also had a bunch of different moves cut or shortened, as well as a lackluster second phase, and, like, the coolest part of the Titan being, like, these badass wings you get don't even show up. And on top of all of that, once the end is chased out of the body of Supreme, Sonic and Sage, who's now piloting Supreme, fly off after the end to space. And, like, you think maybe Sonic would empower Supreme and you get one last, like, Supersonic fight, but nope. We get Galaga. And, like, the potential of the end is so cool, too. Like, the dialogue implies so much, and we don't get to see it because we have to play Galaga. And that was done, like, 3 times throughout the entire game. Okay. Story review pretty much done. You know, while we were talking about boss fights, I've seen so many people complain about them being glorified cutscenes, but, like, come on, these fights are awesome. Supreme and the end aside, but, like, honestly, the entire game is awesome. Sure, it's rushed. Sure, the final boss is lackluster, but, like, the final fight doesn't really diminish the rest of this insanely badass game for me. I genuinely want to see more Sonic games in the future follow this kind of playstyle, Supersonic fights included, even if it goes back to being restricted to final fight. Alright, I think I'm going to end the video here. This script got way out of hand. I actually rewrote this script as the original one was way too long. This one ended up being almost as long as the original one. But 2,482 words later, I think that's the best script I'm getting. I'm still trying to get better at script writing, so hopefully future uploads can be a bit shorter. And if you're still here, thank you so much for staying. It means so much to me to know that people see my video and they enjoy it enough to sit through the entire thing. So, hopefully I see everyone whenever I upload next, because I'm only at the beginning of my one-way dream. That sucked. Why did I write that in the script?